The Mediterranean is hot. Rome had no ice machines, no refrigerators, and no way to artificially freeze anything. And yet this civilization fed a city of roughly 1 million people, supplied armies on campaign hundreds of miles from home, and ran a food trade network stretching from Britain to Egypt. Keeping food edible long enough to actually use it wasn't a minor inconvenience. It was one of the most constant, unglamorous engineering problems the empire ever solved. Chapter 1. Salt, the original preservative. The most basic tool the Romans had was salt, and they used it constantly. Packing meat or fish in salt draws moisture out of it through osmosis, and without that moisture, the bacteria that cause spoilage simply can't survive. Salted fish and meat could last for months instead of days, and salt was cheap and available almost everywhere in the empire, which made it the default method for anyone who needed food to survive a journey, a winter, or a military campaign. Chapter 2. Garum, turning rotting fish into a fortune. The most famous Roman preservation product wasn't a technique, it was a sauce, and it came from something that sounds more like spoilage than preservation. Garum was made by packing small fish, guts and all, into vats or amphorae with heavy amounts of salt, then leaving the mixture to ferment in the sun for weeks or even months. Enzymes and heat broke the fish down until a strong, salty liquid separated out and rose to the top, which workers skimmed off as the finished product. In 2009, Italian researchers excavating Pompeii found 6 sealed clay vessels in a building now called the Garum Shop, buried by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in the middle of actually processing a batch of fish. On the island of Sicily, archaeologists found an amphora roughly 2,300 years old with fish still preserved inside it, direct physical proof of how effective this method really was. Garum wasn't a niche product either. It was used across every level of Roman society, from cheap, rough versions for the poor to expensive branded amphorae of premium garum shipped across the entire empire. Chapter 3. The amphora, Rome's shipping container. None of this worked without a way to actually store and move preserved food without it spoiling in transit. That's where the amphora came in, a tall clay vessel with a narrow neck that could be sealed tightly, stacked efficiently in the curved hull of a ship, and transported for weeks at sea. Amphorae carried garum, wine, olive oil, and preserved fruit across the entire Mediterranean trade network, and their sealed design was a major reason Roman food products could travel such enormous distances and still arrive usable. Chapter 4. Snow and ice from the mountains. For the wealthy, there was an even directer solution: actual cold. Romans sent workers up into the mountains to collect snow and ice, then transported it down to specially built ice houses and deep underground storage pits, insulated with straw or other packing material, to slow melting for as long as possible. This wasn't a way to preserve large amounts of food long term. Ice was expensive and only accessible to people with real money, but it allowed the wealthy to chill drinks, preserve delicate foods for short periods, and even serve chilled desserts, a genuine luxury in the Roman world. Chapter 5. The Underground Cellar. Far more common than imported ice was the underground cellar, called a cella. Digging storage space below ground took advantage of the Earth's natural insulation, keeping temperatures significantly cooler and more stable than the air outside, especially during Mediterranean summers. Cellae were used to store wine, fruit, vegetables, and other perishables that needed to stay cool but didn't require freezing, and this method required no fuel, no imported materials, just digging into the ground itself. Chapter 6. Evaporative cooling with clay pots. Romans also used a clever bit of basic physics, evaporative cooling. Shallow terracotta pots called frittoia were filled with water and placed in shaded, breezy areas. As the water slowly evaporated through the porous clay, it pulled heat away from the contents inside, keeping food and drink noticeably cooler than the surrounding air, all without any moving parts or external power source. Chapter 7. A system that outlasted the empire. None of these methods were entirely unique to Rome. Salting and fermenting fish sauce had roots in earlier Greek tradition, and versions of these techniques appear across the ancient Mediterranean world. But Rome scaled these methods into a genuine trade infrastructure, standardized production, sealed transport containers, and supply chains stretching across an entire empire. Fish sauce fermentation, in particular, didn't disappear with Rome. It continued in medieval Europe, and remarkably similar fermented fish sauces remain a staple of many Asian cuisines today, a preservation technique so effective it was independently valuable enough to survive the fall of the civilization that perfected it. Every method here, salt, fermentation, sealed clay vessels, imported ice, underground cooling, evaporation, solved the exact same problem using nothing but materials and physics already available in the ancient world. If this kind of deep dive interests you, drop a like, subscribe for more, and let me know in the comments which ancient problem you want covered next.